Hi, everyone, and welcome to this Aviation Week Fast Chat in association with CETA, where today we'll be discussing how collaboration will shape the future of aviation. My name is Wesley Charnock. I'm the Content Marketing Director of the Aviation Week Network, and delighted to be joined by Stefan Villeneuve, Vice President, Americas and Europe for CETA for Aircraft. Thanks for joining us today, Stefan.
It's my pleasure.
So we're here to talk about collaboration, Stefan. I'd like you to talk a little bit about that. What is the role of collaboration in the aviation industry now and in the future?
Well, collaboration is always important, but it's becoming even more important. And the reason is fairly simple, right? Aircraft operations are obviously very complicated, right? They involve many, many different factors. And when you're trying to optimize these operations, you have to endeavor to do many, many different things, many initiatives. And it's not possible to envision that one, company would be able to cover the breadth of the things that an airline, for example, needs to do to kind of optimize their operations. So in that context, when companies come together, they can kind of make the life of the airlines a bit easier by kind of combining solutions that make perfect sense. I'll give you an example. There's a lot of airlines that track the success of their fuel saving initiatives through dashboards, right? They could include many, could be 40 different initiatives that they're following up on to make sure that they're efficient saving fuel. When we look from our perspective, when we bring things like CETA OptiFlight to the market, where we optimizes, all the phases of flight, well, if you look at, an airline that would want to discuss with the likes of, for example, GE Digital, to get a fuel dashboard, they would still have to have a separate, kind of solution that would go through CETA to optimize other parts of the flight. So when companies, for example, like ourselves and GE Digital work together, then what you can do from a simple integration perspective, you provide the airlines and the customers a way to see, not only the result of their initiative to the dashboard, also, having the optimization result of something like OptiFlight incorporated in the same type of tools. So companies working together to make life simpler for the customers who are trying to keep track of all these initiatives, across their entire business.
Sure, that makes sense, and it gives a more holistic product to the end user. Obviously, we now work in a sphere where data and data integrity is very important. How do you manage, that kind of collaboration across organizations from a data integrity perspective?
Well, so I mean, when we're looking at it, data is becoming increasingly important and that's not only true of the aviation industry, but what we're doing now is we're taking an approach where, obviously data and data management and getting value of data is a fairly large endeavor. And what we're trying to do is trying to bring industry together, right? And providing, for example, through Data Hub, we have a platform, which, is an agnostic platform that allows the airlines to control their own data, which is to say that our position is that the airline owns the data. And then what we're doing is providing tools that allow airlines to confide in us, the management of their data so that they can be used through various channels with a lot of the partners that airlines would want to work for, whether it's on, fuel with the engine manufacturers or other applications, whether third party or internal. So basically we're putting ourselves at the center of a data ecosystem that allows airlines to pretty much, control the flow of data, where it goes, its integrity. So this is one example, for example, where we look at the value of collaborating, where we kind of facilitating this kind of management of data and, I would say, distribution of this data through the various channels that are required for airlines to optimize their operations.
Okay, thank you. You mentioned OptiFly before. In terms of the products and innovations that you're currently working on, are there any other innovations that you at CETA are currently working on?
Well, I mean, we are working on basically, I would look at it from the perspective of, obviously we're building on the OptiFlight portfolio. So that portfolio, in terms of optimizing the various phases of flight, will keep growing. But it's not in isolation, in the sense that, once you get, QAR data, quick access recorded data, which is what we'll call full flight data for the perspective of this discussion, and for example, we'll use full flight data to provide OptiClimb, CETA OptiClimb, which, as the name implies, optimizes the climb phase of the flight. Well, once you have this data, the QR data, that's where you have the link with Data Hub, because you have this data that you're using for OptiClimb, and then in one central kind of repository for this data, this allows you to get what I was saying before, kind of build on what else you want to do. Like what you have, you want to add data engineering capabilities, more analytics ability, then you have the data and you can build on it. So all of us are working together to kind of see where the future goes, in terms of optimization. But we know that the demands will be much greater to kind of like centralize the data, make sure it is complete, make sure it is safely guarded, and then how do we actually, bring value through the use of this data. So that's obviously something that we're going to invest in. So both on the applicative side is more like what we'll say like OptiFlight, but it's not OptiFlight by itself. It's OptiFlight in the context of a data management platform such as Data Hub.
Right, thank you. Obviously, in your position, you're more focused on American and European markets. What are the main kind of trends in collaboration we can expect to see emerging in those markets?
Well, what we're seeing that, like I would like to mention the fact that we are also, when we look at the integrity of the data and kind of where we're trying to take this, MRO blockchain, which is a solution we've brought to market, is one of these areas where, again, bringing the various actors together and that, having a way to actually share data that's controlled through the blockchain technology. And when you look at it, in the context of what we're talking about here in Europe and America as well, the partnership that we've discussed, in quite a large measure are with companies that are in the Americas and in Europe. Because when you look at the equipment manufacturers, right, whether it's aircraft, whether it's avionics, whether it's applications, where they're spread around the world. At the same time, there's a very high concentration of these players, in the American and European markets. So I think that, like a lot of the innovation on these various streams of activities will be driven through these, partners based in these two regions. So I think that we're at the very center now of where most of these solutions will be designed. And then as they grow throughout the world, we'll have obviously, distribution throughout all the regions, but I see that the Europe and the Americas will be the driving force behind what we're talking about here.
But I'm glad that there's people out there who understand blockchain, because I struggle to get my head around it every time I look into it. Listen, Stefan, we're out of time, so I just wanted to say a huge thank you for joining us today, and of course, a huge thank you to everyone watching. Thanks very much, Stefan, and we'll see you next time for the next Fast Chat. Goodbye.
Thank you.